Have you ever felt like a single piece could completely unravel your position, even a seemingly insignificant pawn? Sometimes, one small structural detail can cast a long shadow over your entire game. Well, today we are shining a light on one such detail, the backward pawn. These pawns are significant weaknesses in your pawn structure because they cannot be defended by other pawns and often become easy, static targets for your opponent's pieces, severely restricting your own piece activity. So, what exactly makes a backward pawn such a thorny problem? A backward pawn is defined as a pawn on a semi-open file that cannot advance to a square where it can be defended by a neighboring pawn. Imagine your pawn on d3 with no pawns on c2 or e2 to support its advance. It is stuck. The primary reason for its vulnerability is this lack of pawn support. Unlike other pawns, which can often form chains and defend each other, a backward pawn stands alone. This means that if it is attacked, only your more valuable pieces like knights or bishops can defend it. Secondly, because it is usually on a semi-open file, the opponent can easily pile up pressure on it with their rooks, queen, and other pieces. It becomes a magnet for attack. Thirdly, and perhaps most crucially, the square directly in front of a backward pawn often becomes a superb blockading outpost for an enemy piece. A knight on such a square, for example, can become incredibly powerful, controlling central squares and being impossible to dislodge by other pawns. Finally, having a backward pawn almost always ties down your own pieces to its defense, preventing them from participating in more active attacking or defensive operations elsewhere on the board. This restriction in piece activity can be a slow, suffocating disadvantage. Now that we understand the nature of this weakness, how can you spot and handle them? When evaluating a position, first identify any pawns that are on a file without friendly pawns on adjacent files on the same rank or a more advanced rank. Then, check if they are blocked by an enemy pawn directly in front. If they cannot advance to gain pawn support, you have found a backward pawn. As an attacker, your goal is to occupy that blockading outpost square, often with a knight, and then pile up pressure on the backward pawn. Look for opportunities to trade off its defenders or bring more attackers. As a defender, your primary aim is to prevent the enemy from establishing an outpost on the square in front of your backward pawn. You might try to exchange the pawn if possible, or create counterplay on the other side of the board to distract your opponent. This concept of a blockading outpost is a cornerstone of positional chess. Great players are always looking to create these unassailable strong points for their pieces. A knight that entrenches itself on a blockading outpost in front of a backward pawn is often referred to as a monster knight due to its immense positional power. Understanding these structural nuances, like the weakness of a backward pawn and the strength of an outpost, moves your game beyond mere tactical calculations and into the realm of deeper strategic understanding. Ultimately, recognizing the dangers of backward pawns is a crucial step in developing your strategic vision. It empowers you to build more resilient pawn structures for yourself and pinpoint the vulnerabilities in your opponent's position. By understanding how these seemingly small details impact the entire board, you can make more informed decisions, initiate more effective plans, and ultimately elevate your chess to a much higher level.